Thanks for baking with me today. I'm Andrea Geary, a deputy food editor at Cooks Illustrated, and today I'm going to show you how to make a loaf of bread, a rustic boule, using just 4 ingredients and your hands. No mixer required. Making bread by hand is the best way to learn. Don't worry, I'm going to show you every step. Stir 3½ cups of bread flour and 1/2 teaspoon of instant yeast together in a large bowl. Add 1 2/3 cups of room temperature water and stir until a uniform mass forms and no dry flour remains. About 1 minute. Don't be tempted to add more water at this point. You'll regret it later because your dough will be too sticky. Cover the bowl and let the dough rest for 15 minutes. Sprinkle 1½ teaspoons of salt over the dough. Add the remaining 2 tablespoons of room temperature water and, using your hand, mix until the salt is distributed and the water has been absorbed. Turn the dough out onto an unfloured counter, scraping the bowl well to remove all the bits of dough. Do not wash the bowl. Now we're going to knead the dough using a method called slap and fold. Slide the fingers of both your hands under the right quarter of the dough, placing your left hand at 12 o'clock and your right hand at 6 o'clock. Pick up the dough and turn it 90 degrees counterclockwise, letting most of the dough hang down. Slap the bottom of the dough onto the counter so it sticks. Stretch the dough toward yourself and then, in a quick motion, fold the dough in your hands over the end of the dough that's stuck to the counter. Grasp the right quarter of the dough with your hands at 12 and 6 o'clock again and repeat the motion. Keep going until the dough is elastic and mostly smooth, 6 to 8 minutes. Stop occasionally to scrape the stray pieces of dough on the counter back into the dough. In the beginning, the dough may look like it's breaking apart, but just keep going. Though this process is called slap and fold, really the most important part of it is the stretching of the dough. You slap it down, stretch it back, fold it forward, but as you're folding it forward, you're also stretching it outward slightly. It's the stretching that's really developing the gluten. As you get toward the end of the process, you should be a little gentler and use smaller movements for about 1 minute. Shape the dough into a ball by pulling the edges into the middle. Return the dough seam side down to the bowl. Cover the bowl and let the dough rise until it has increased in size by 50%, 1 to 1½ hours. Don't allow it to double. Okay, now that the dough has risen, it's time to shape it. Lightly flour the top of the dough and gently invert it onto the counter, taking care to retain as much gas as possible. Slide your lightly floured fingers under the dough and pull it gently into a 10-inch round. Avoid touching the top of the dough because it's pretty sticky. Fold the bottom third of the dough toward the middle and press gently to adhere. Gently tug the left side of the dough outward, fold it toward the middle, and press to adhere. Repeat on the right side of the dough. Gently stretch the top of the dough over the bottom of the dough and press to adhere. Invert the dough so it's seam side down on the counter. Cup your hands around the dough and slowly drag toward you on the counter. Turn the dough 90 degrees and repeat. Continue to turn and drag the dough until it's round and evenly taut. Be careful not to go too far. Be really attentive to the tension as it builds. Rest the dough on the counter for 5 minutes so that gravity sets that bottom seam. While the dough rests, line a colander or one of these cane baskets called a banneton with a large linen or cotton dish towel and dust it lightly with flour. Invert the dough and place it seam side up in the prepared banneton. Cover it and refrigerate for 12 to 18 hours. Adjust the oven rack to the middle position. Place a 6 to 8 quart Dutch oven with the lid on the rack. Heat the oven to 500 degrees. When the oven is fully heated, lightly grease a 12-inch square of parchment paper. Lay the parchment sprayed side down over the dough and gently invert the dough onto the counter. Remove the banneton and towel. Carefully remove the pot from the oven, place it on the stovetop, and set the lid aside. Using a razor blade or a sharp serrated knife, make 4 6-inch long, 1/2-inch deep slits in a crosshatch pattern on top of the dough. Pick up the dough by lifting the parchment edges and lower it into the pot. Carefully cover the pot and transfer it to the oven. Bake for 20 minutes. Transfer the pot to the stovetop and carefully remove the lid. Place a baking sheet on the middle rack and place the pot on the baking sheet. The baking sheet will prevent the bottom of the loaf from getting too dark. Reduce the oven temperature to 450 degrees. Continue to bake, uncovered, until the loaf is deeply browned and registers at least 200 degrees, 10 to 15 minutes longer. Having a deep, rich color is important to the flavor of the crust. So if the temperature is slightly above 200, but the loaf looks pale, it's fine to give it another couple of minutes. Using a thick towel or oven mitt, carefully transfer the loaf to a wire rack and let it cool completely before slicing, 2 to 3 hours. I hope you'll try your hand at this loaf. Learning how to make bread by hand isn't a one-and-done kind of proposition. It's a process. Take photos of your loaves as you make them. They'll get prettier and taller the more you practice. Thanks for watching.